The restaurant was the kind of place people only saw in magazines: soft music, warm golden lights, and crystal chandeliers that shimmered like falling stars. It smelled faintly of roses and expensive wine. Waiters in black suits glided silently between tables, their trays carrying dishes too perfect to eat. And right in the middle of all that glitter and luxury sat Lila Hayes, in her simple blue dress, her wheelchair neatly parked beside the table. The hem brushed against her knees as she smoothed it nervously, her fingers trembling slightly. The soft hum of conversations around her made her feel even smaller, even more out of place. Her heart had been pounding ever since she arrived. She checked the time on her phone for the 5th time, 7 minutes past 8. He was late. Maybe traffic. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd seen her through the window and decided not to come in at all. Lila tried to push that thought away. Tonight was supposed to be different. Her best friend, Chloe, had promised her this would help her start over. He's nice, Lila, Chloe had said. Kind, smart, and most importantly, not shallow. Trust me, you'll like him. Lila wanted to believe her. After the accident 2 years ago, she hadn't gone on a single date. Not one. Most men either pitied her or avoided her completely. Some even acted uncomfortable, like being around her might infect them with her misfortune. So when Chloe had insisted on setting her up, Lila hesitated for days before agreeing. But now, sitting there under the restaurant's golden lights, she felt the familiar ache of regret tightening in her chest. People were staring. She could feel their eyes. A few whispered behind menus, others just glanced, then quickly looked away as if embarrassed to be caught looking. Who brings a girl in a wheelchair here? Someone murmured. Maybe it's one of those charity setups, another said, not even bothering to lower her voice. Laughter followed, quiet but sharp enough to sting. Lila lowered her head, wishing she could disappear into the floor. She hated that feeling, the one where every look felt like pity, every whisper like a reminder that she was different. She reached for her glass of water, her hand shaking slightly. The accident had left her body weak for months, but she had fought to regain every bit of strength she could. Physical therapy had been painful, endless, and humiliating at times. Yet she'd done it. She'd learned to move, to be independent again. But no amount of therapy could fix the way people looked at her. Lila. Her head snapped up. The voice was deep, calm, and surprisingly gentle. Standing in front of her table was a tall man in a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, dark hair slightly tousled, eyes the color of a stormy sea. Why yes, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm Lila. He gave her a slow, careful smile. I'm Ethan Cole. Her breath caught. She knew that name. Everyone did. Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole Industries, one of the most powerful business figures in the city. A man who rarely appeared in public without being photographed, a single father known for keeping his private life fiercely guarded. He sat down across from her, resting his hands on the table, studying her with quiet curiosity. You're not what I expected, he said softly. Lila swallowed. I hope that's not a bad thing. Before he could answer, a burst of laughter broke from the bar behind them. A group of young women were huddled together, their phones out, recording. One of them, the tall blonde in the red dress, was Chloe. Lila froze. Can you believe it? One of them whispered loudly, not even trying to hide it. He actually showed up. Oh my God, this is gold. Look at his face. He has no idea. I told you he'd come. Poor guy probably thinks it's a real date. The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel. It was cutting, humiliating, and loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Lila's world tilted. Her stomach dropped. The blood drained from her face as realization hit her. This wasn't a real date. It never was. It was a setup, a joke, a cruel game designed for someone else's entertainment. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. She couldn't breathe. She wanted to vanish, to roll away, to hide from the dozens of eyes now watching her, waiting for her reaction. Ethan turned slowly, his jaw tightening as his gaze landed on the laughing women. What did you just say? His voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge beneath it, like quiet thunder before a storm. The laughter died instantly. Chloe looked frozen, her smirk faltering. I didn't mean, she started, but Ethan raised a hand, silencing her. He looked back at Lila, his expression softening in an instant. You didn't know, did you? Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head, unable to speak. For a long moment, Ethan just looked at her, then at the room full of staring faces, at the waiters frozen in awkward silence, and at the women who still clutched their phones, guilty and embarrassed. Then he stood up, walked to her side, and with quiet authority, pulled out the chair across from her. He sat down again and gestured for the waiter. "Good evening," he said calmly. "We'll start with the chef's recommendation, please." The waiter blinked in confusion, then nodded and hurried away. The restaurant had gone silent, every pair of eyes watching. Lila looked at him, stunned. "You're staying," she whispered. Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Of course, why wouldn't I?" She blinked rapidly, unsure what to say. "Because this was all a joke. You don't have to." "Lila," he interrupted gently, "you didn't do anything wrong. They did, and I don't let other people decide who's worth sitting with." Something inside her cracked open. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had needed to hear those words. He leaned back slightly, his tone soft but firm. "Let them watch. They'll get bored eventually." The group of women by the bar lowered their eyes. A few quietly slipped out, realizing their cruel prank had backfired spectacularly. Ethan poured her some water, his movements calm, unbothered. "So," he said, as if nothing had happened, "tell me about you, Lila Hayes." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "There's not much to tell. I don't believe that," he said with a small smile. "There's always something to tell." And somehow, despite everything, she found herself talking. About her art. About how she used to paint landscapes before the accident. About how she now painted from her apartment, selling small pieces online to cover rent. Ethan listened. Not politely, not distractedly, but with genuine attention. His eyes never wavered. When she mentioned the car accident, he didn't flinch or pity her. He just nodded quietly. "It must have been hard," he said. "It was," she admitted. "But I learned to keep going. People see the chair before they see me, though. It's exhausting." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "People see what they want to see. Doesn't mean they're right." Something warm spread through her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. By the time dinner arrived, the tension in the air had faded. Lila even caught herself laughing, real laughter, soft and unguarded. Ethan's dry humor surprised her. He told her stories about his son, about how the boy insisted on wearing superhero costumes to school. When the waiter came to clear their plates, Ethan ignored the curious glances and reached across the table. His hand brushed hers, firm but gentle. "You shouldn't let anyone make you feel small, Lila." Her heart stumbled. "I try not to." "Try harder," he said quietly, his gaze unwavering. "Because you deserve better than this world's cruelty." Lila swallowed the lump in her throat. She had come to this restaurant expecting to be humiliated, and somehow, she had found kindness instead. When he stood to help her out at the end of the evening, she realized every head in the restaurant had turned to watch. But this time, she didn't care. Not one bit. He guided her to the exit, matching his pace with hers. Outside, the night was cool, and the city lights glowed like scattered diamonds on wet pavement. "Lila," Ethan said softly as he opened the door to his car, "you deserve someone who sees you, not your chair, not your scars. Just you." Her voice trembled. "And you, what do you see?" He met her gaze, eyes deep and steady. "I see someone stronger than anyone I've ever met." The city outside her apartment window glimmered in shades of silver and blue, and for the first time in years, Lila didn't feel like an outsider looking in. That night after the blind date, she hadn't been able to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she replayed the scene, Ethan sitting across from her, calm and unshaken, his deep voice cutting through the laughter that had once terrified her. No one had ever defended her before. Not like that. By morning, her phone buzzed non-stop with messages. Some were apologies from Chloe and her friends, half-hearted, forced, meaningless. Others were from strangers. Somehow, someone had posted a clip from the restaurant online, but the story had taken a life of its own. Instead of ridicule, it turned into compassion. The CEO who stood up against cruelty. The date that silenced bullies. People flooded her inbox with words of encouragement. Some called her brave, some called her beautiful, but Lila didn't know what to feel. It wasn't fame she wanted, it was peace. A message popped up in her inbox that morning. Greater than Ethan Cole. I hope you're okay. Can I see you again? Her heart skipped. She reread the message 10 times before replying. Greater than Lila. You don't have to check on me. I'm fine. Ethan. I know, but I still want to. She stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment before typing one word. Greater than Lila. Okay. The next evening, Ethan arrived at her small apartment building, dressed casually this time. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, jeans that made him look less like a CEO and more like a man she could actually talk to. In his hand was a small box. Peace offering, he said when she opened the door. Inside was a simple set of paintbrushes and a stack of new canvases. Her throat tightened. You didn't have to. I know, he said softly. But I wanted to. You said you stopped painting after the accident. Maybe it's time to start again. Something inside her melted. He wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't offering pity. He was simply giving her back a piece of herself she thought she'd lost. They talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. The accident, his company, the son he adored. Ethan's eyes softened whenever he spoke about Noah, his little boy with a wild imagination and a laugh that, he said, could fill an entire house. When Ethan finally left, he smiled at her the same way he had at the restaurant, steady, warm, patient. And when the door closed behind him, Lila realized she was smiling too. Days turned into weeks. Their conversations became a quiet rhythm in her life. Texts in the morning, coffee in the afternoons, video calls in the evenings. Sometimes he'd stop by after work, bringing takeout and stories about Noah's latest mischiefs. One rainy Friday evening, Ethan surprised her by asking, would you meet him? Your son, she said, startled. He nodded. He keeps asking why I smile at my phone all the time. She laughed, her cheeks warming. I'd love to. That Sunday, Lila found herself outside a small park, the autumn air crisp and cool. Ethan was waiting by the playground, and beside him stood a small boy with messy brown hair and the same piercing blue eyes as his father. Lila, this is Noah, Ethan said, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. Noah tilted his head, curious. Hi, he said shyly, clutching a toy plane. Dad says you're an artist. Lila smiled. I try to be. Want to help me paint sometime? Noah's face lit up. Can we paint airplanes? Every kind, she said. Even ones that can fly to the moon. Ethan watched them, something tender in his expression. For the next hour, the three of them sat on a park bench, laughing as Noah told stories about Dad's burnt pancakes, and the monster under the couch. When it was time to go, Noah tugged on his father's sleeve. Can Lila come for dinner? He asked. Please. Ethan met her eyes. You heard the boss, he said with a smile. Dinner at Ethan's home was warm and messy and real. Lila watched as father and son cooked together, flour on their faces, laughter echoing through the kitchen. She had never seen Ethan this relaxed, this alive. When Noah finally dozed off on the couch, Lila found herself standing beside Ethan, watching him gently cover his son with a blanket. You're a good father, she said softly. He turned toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. I try to be. After his mom left, I didn't know if I could do this. But he gave me purpose. And now, she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Now, it feels like I'm finding pieces of myself I didn't know were missing. Their eyes met, the silence between them thick with meaning. He stepped closer, but not too close. He wasn't the kind of man who rushed things. Instead, he reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers. His touch was warm, careful, and it sent a quiet shiver through her. Lila, he said softly, you make the world quieter. And I haven't had that in a long time. She smiled through the tears she didn't realize she was holding back. And you make it feel safe. They stood there for what felt like forever, two broken people holding on to something fragile but real. The weeks that followed were filled with small, beautiful moments. Ethan helped Lila set up her art studio again, one she'd abandoned after the accident. He encouraged her to showcase her work. With his support, she submitted her paintings to a local gallery. When the owner called to offer her an exhibition, Lila cried. On the night of the opening, the gallery glowed with soft light. Her paintings lined the walls, each one a piece of her pain, her recovery, her quiet triumph. The place was packed, reporters mingling with art lovers, all eager to meet the woman whose story had already touched millions online. Ethan arrived in a sleek black suit, Noah holding his hand, carrying a small bouquet of daisies. "Dad says these are your favorite," Noah said, handing them to her. She knelt slightly, smiling. "They are. Thank you, Noah." Ethan's eyes met hers, full of pride. "You did this," he said quietly. "No," she whispered. "We did this." As the night went on, people approached to praise her work, to shake her hand, to tell her how much her courage inspired them. But through it all, her eyes kept finding Ethan's across the room. Every time they did, her heart beat a little faster. Near the end of the evening, when most guests had left, Ethan walked up to her as she stood before a painting, a soft watercolor of a wheelchair beside a blooming field. "I love this one," he said. "It feels free." She smiled faintly. "It's how I want to feel. Not trapped. Just free." Ethan turned toward her, his voice deep and steady. "You are free, Lila. And I hope you know that you've given me that too." Her eyes widened. "You," he nodded. "Before you, I was just surviving. For Noah, for the company, but I wasn't living. You reminded me what it means to actually feel again." The tears came before she could stop them. "Ethan," he reached for her hand, just like he had that first night, steady, sure, unafraid of the world watching. "I don't care what anyone thinks. That night, they tried to humiliate you. Instead, you became the most extraordinary part of my life." Lila felt something bloom inside her, something she hadn't dared to feel in years: love. When he leaned in and kissed her forehead, she closed her eyes, letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was what she had been waiting for. From that day on, their lives intertwined like brushstrokes on a canvas. Lila's art flourished, her story inspiring others with disabilities to chase their dreams. Ethan found balance again, laughter returning to his home, his son happier than ever. And every evening, when the sun dipped below the skyline, Lila would paint while Ethan read to Noah. Sometimes he'd glance up and catch her smiling, her hands moving effortlessly over the canvas, free and alive. She had once been the girl everyone pitied, the one who was laughed at, mocked, used as a cruel joke. But now, she was the woman who taught a powerful CEO how to feel again. And when people later asked Ethan what had drawn him to her that night, what made him stay, he would always smile and say, "Because when the whole world laughed, she held her head high." And that's the kind of woman worth taking by the hand. And he never let go. For the first time in a long, long while, Lila smiled without fear. She didn't know it then, but that night, the cruel joke that was supposed to break her, was the night that would change everything.